Hi everybody, welcome to Think Human. Today I'm talking to Pat Chapman-Pincher. She's had a long career working at the bleeding edge of new technologies that have changed the world, including mobile, the internet, e-cash and video on demand, which obviously is an area close to my heart. Today though, we're not going to talk about technology. We're actually going to talk about something that is absolutely critical to the success of business in the future, and that's emotional intelligence. Pat, why don't we start by just talking about what emotional intelligence is?
Okay, and it's a real pleasure to be here. But let me start with what everybody knows about, which is IQ. So that great measure that everybody worries about, and you can join special clubs if you've got a very high IQ.
Yeah.
IQ is really a measure of people's reasoning ability. So it's all about how well can you take information, um, how well can you apply logic to answering questions or making predictions, and that's become rather important at the moment. But it's really only that. That's the only thing it measures. And I have a relative who has an incredibly high IQ, but frankly cannot be trusted to run a bath, and I know that because I've done a lot of mopping up after him. Um, Emotional intelligence, or we'll call it EQ because that's a nice short way of saying it,
Yeah.
is something very different. So it was really first identified by a guy called Daniel Goleman, who's an American psychologist. And he developed this framework which has got 5 elements in it, and they define emotional intelligence. And they're self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, which is one of the really big ones, and social skills. And you can have an incredibly high IQ and really not have any of those. And I think we can all think about bosses we've had in the past who clearly never had any of those. And they've always mattered. Um, but my argument is that in today's world, they're going to be much more important than IQ.
Why? What is it about the world today that's making EQ more important?
At the moment, our heads are slightly full of COVID.
Yeah.
And one of the things COVID has done is it's really upset economies. And I think it's masked at the moment
Yeah.
a lot of the underlying trends that were there before COVID. And I think we need to go, as we come out of COVID, we need to start thinking about what were the trends that were there before. And just as an aside, if you look at retail, sure, retail has collapsed,
Yeah.
but it was collapsing before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, there's an awful lot of people blaming COVID for their businesses not being viable anymore. They weren't viable before COVID arrived. So, we have to be very careful what we blame COVID for.
Yeah. Yeah. It becomes
Um,
the easy excuse, doesn't it?
it becomes a really easy excuse, and you'll see every company in the land throwing the kitchen sink in with its results over the next few
Yeah.
months and blaming COVID for all of the things that were underneath, and may not have been too great.
What is it that you have to look out for?
Um, I think you're looking out for all of those things on the Daniel Goldman list.
Yeah.
Um, but the one that's fairly easy to identify is empathy.
Yeah.
So, we all have greater or lesser elements of empathy within our lives, and it's the ability to read other people
Yeah.
and to it's the ability to put yourself in their shoes.
Can you build empathy, or is it
Uh,
something that you have? Um,
it's like every skill, you can build it. I mean, you can always learn to run faster, think harder. Most skills are learnt skills.
yeah.
There are a few you're born with, but mostly those skills are
Yeah.
learnt. So people will be born with greater or lesser degrees of empathy. But it's one of those skills that you can really hone. And empathy really comes back to your understanding of yourself. One of the things I think we need to do, and I'll come on to why I think this is so much more important than it used to be,
Yeah.
um, is I think we've really got to work on our skills and our ability to understand what's going on in other people's heads. But to do that, you have to understand what's going on in your own.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
No, the people who truly hate themselves will tend to, not really relate well to other people. So there's an element in here about how do I feel about myself, how confident am I, and how do you build that confidence? You build it by looking at um, your own motivations. Why am I doing this? Why am I reacting in this way? And then spending some time. Um, I mean, I know some people are huge fans of meditation. It's not one of those things that's ever particularly worked for me, but just thinking about or meditating on, why am I feeling like this?
Yeah.
What button has this pressed? Because we've all got voices in the back of our heads.
Yeah, I when I did the exec MBA, I'd say one of the biggest parts of that was the time that was specifically reserved for self-reflection.
Yes.
It wasn't like, I guess, the undergraduate degree where you were thrown information at you and you just had to absorb it.
Yeah.
and work it out.
Yes, and I think, and asking yourself the why question.
Yeah.
Because we've all got our own stories. And so, some of those stories for many people, are very, very painful. And there's lots of things in their lives that they've never quite faced up to. And those drive their reaction to other people. If you were brought up never to trust, it's hard to build a trusting team.
About that why piece, and how a lot of us will have seen or read the Start With Why by Simon Sinek, and applied it to business.
Yeah.
I've lost count of the number of times I've used that within roles that I've been in. But someone said to me, "Have you ever applied it to yourself?"
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually that pulled me up, because I'd never really thought about it in that sort of angle before. But it absolutely is a really important part, I think, of something everybody should do.
Yeah. So why are you ambitious? Why are you not ambitious?
Yeah.
Why are you chasing money? And why can't you relate to people? And why are you so much more comfortable, as quite a lot of people have appeared to be, in a command and control environment, provided you're the one in command and control?
Of course.
Curiosity, I think, is one of the really important elements of emotional intelligence. So, and it's going back to that why question.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I reacting like this?
Yeah, that's one of the values that I always seek out when hiring. Actually, is that curiosity piece, especially given we work on the edge of what's possible. You can't just take what we do and just go with it. You've got to be able to think and be curious about what's the next step, and how does this impact on the wider picture.
Absolutely. And I've worked with too many people who have had a brilliant idea, but and are rushing down to get it to market, but have never asked the why question. And then they launch this amazing product on the world, and the world isn't really very interested.
Yes, the world has a habit of not caring.
Yes, because you've never asked the why would anybody want this?
Yes, exactly.
And why would enough people want it?
Yeah.
You may find a couple of really loyal people, but you need more than that for a market. So if you're in sales, if you're in marketing, this curiosity, this why question, this understanding of how other people operate is absolutely crucial. And as we come out of COVID, we're into a much more competitive world.
What is the transformation that's happening because of COVID? What are the changes that you're seeing that's going to really make EQ more important?
I think there are two. One of them was there before COVID, and that's the increasing penetration of industry by AI.
Okay.
So by artificial intelligence. Now, computers do lots of things better than people. You know, they're faster, they're more thorough, they work 24/7, they don't need coffee breaks. They're amazing. And they are going into areas now. I mean, we've had them in manufacturing for years and years and years, and we've all got used to what computers do, and we've forgotten that actually they took away people's jobs. Now we're seeing them coming into accountancy, into architecture, into lawyers' offices, all of those jobs where, however much people tell you that what they do is unique and important, actually it's repetitive work. Doing legal research on cases is repetitive work. Doing audit is incredibly repetitive work. That's much better done by machines. And so you'll see, and we were seeing it before, but it's amplified now, we'll see all that work shifting to machines. So then you're left with a lot of human beings going, okay, so now what? So now where is my value? And if you're a person who's always relied on your IQ, then you've got to ask, where can I add value? So that's one piece, and that was happening pre-COVID. The other piece that's post-COVID, I think, is there will be companies that have gone out of the market because of COVID. But everybody that's left in will be fighting for every dollar they can get. And so, again, this is back to the, why are people going to buy this? Why are people going to come to us? Do they even know we're here to come to?
Yes.
So, just have a, I think you're back to the why question. And that's why I think we need EQ. And the people that seriously need to worry about this are the techies and the people in professional services, because their jobs are very high IQ jobs. If you're in a high IQ job, unless you're senior partner, but I'd argue most of that's EQ because you spend your life taking people out to lunch, then you're going to need, it's the people with EQ.
Are all these people going to have to be retrained to be able to find all these the new opportunities that are out there, or is just focusing on EQ sufficient? How does it all fit together, I guess, is my question.
It's never going to be sufficient. So focusing on EQ will really improve your own EQ, and it will fit you better. But if you think that a developer can stop developing and become something, I don't know, a health worker overnight, that's not going to happen. So then there needs to be a real retraining. But that's always happened. Every industrial revolution drives a need for retraining. We took people off farms and put them in factories. Well, the farmers learnt to be factory workers, but I think it was probably a painful process.
Yeah, completely.
What this will do is shift people around in society. So there is, I think, three things. One, you need to concentrate on your own EQ. Secondly, you need to look at, what am I doing now and where would I like to go, and what is the retraining for that? And that's a lot of research and actually going and doing something about it. And I think the third thing is the way companies have to react, that they have to start looking at, who have I got? who have I got and who do I need for the future? So what does the future of my company look like? What skills do I need? And there's always been some work on skills, but I'd argue that post-COVID that really needs to be done again. What leadership team do you need? What skills do they want? And how are you going to go about finding that?
I remember we talked a little bit about a sort of framework that you had for EQ in terms of the critical factors to developing it. Do you want to touch on that? I think that would be really, really interesting to go through.
Yes, I mean, you always need a good acronym. So this one's CREAM. So start with curiosity. And we've talked a bit about curiosity, but learning new things and particularly engaging with other people.
Yeah.
We're much more of a networking world than we ever were. So the R in CREAM is restraint, and that's really understanding your own emotions and controlling what's appropriate and what's inappropriate.
Yeah.
And if you have anger management issues, this is really the time to get to them and figure out what it is that's driving them. I don't mean by that you should be inauthentic.
Right.
But you need to understand yourself and just understand how you have appropriate emotions rather than inappropriate ones. So you're not stamping around the office screaming, or stamping around the house screaming, come to that.
Yeah.
Empathy, which is the E, I think we've talked about a lot.
Yes.
The A is, it's part of the whole restraint piece, which is awareness of emotions as they happen. And then assessing your attitudes and trying to manage them.
Yeah, that strikes me as quite a hard one, because you're having to do it in real time, I guess.
If you can do it in real time, that's ideal. But sometimes, and the driving one's a classic. You can do it afterwards.
Right.
Yeah, after you've stopped shouting and waving your arms at someone that's not let you in.
Yeah.
You can then think, was that remotely appropriate? And did I just endanger me and everybody else?
Yeah.
And the last one, the M, is motivation. And that's really about being the best person you can be.
Okay.
So I am going to behave in a way that I would like me to be behaving. It's not about sort of am I going to finish this this particular piece of work by 6 o'clock on Friday.
Yeah.
It's about how am I going to really do my best all the time.
Yeah, I guess it's a more human aspect to motivation rather than it being a more ambitious sort of aspect to motivation.
Yes, and it's not because the boss tells me I have to.
Yeah.
I'll never get my bonus. It's because I want to do this.
Yeah.
So those are the 5, and they're a really good framework, and they're about looking at yourself.
Yeah.
And you can do that so there's 2 elements to yourself. One is just sitting down and looking at yourself, and looking at how you react and why.
Yeah.
The other one is just asking other people.
Okay.
That's a really hard one.
Yeah.
You'll get useful feedback from 360s at work sometimes.
Yeah.
Looking at the good bits as well as the bad bits is important. But then just talking to people about how they see you.
Yeah.
How are you reacting? Are you reacting appropriately? Are you reacting inappropriately? I mean, the Zoom has been interesting.
Okay.
Because you can actually see on Zoom how people are reacting. So if you've got 10 people in a Zoom room, you can see very clearly in a way that you can't necessarily when you're all around a table who's dominating the conversation, who hasn't said a word, who's clearly doing their email, um, which is harder in a face-to-face meeting.
Yes.
And I think that's exposed quite a lot of things about what's going on in a team.
Yeah.
It's also exposed sort of who the dominant people are.
I guess so. One question that came up as we were discussing this was specifically around remote work and emotional intelligence. You talked about Zoom calls. Are there other aspects to it that that have an impact?
I think as we move on and as more stays online, and it's inevitably going to, because of the financial benefits and the benefits to people in not having to commute. People will only go into the office 1 or 2 days a week, I believe.
Yeah.
How do you bring new people into a team? And how do you just gossip about people's lives?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, when you've known somebody for a long time, you get on a Zoom call and you go, you know, how are you? How's Fred? How are your holidays? Da, 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 da. So there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of shared history there.
Yeah.
If you have no shared history with people that have come into a team, it's very hard, I think. And we need to find ways around that.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
We've got a lot more done.
Bringing it back to EQ, it's not something that you do once. It's something that you have to keep doing. Is that right?
I think this is about how do you build your own character, your own wisdom.
Yeah.
And that's a lifetime.
Yeah.
And if you ever think you've got there, then you probably need to be locked away.
Yeah, I suspect it's one of those things that when you think you've got there, then you're probably at the start of another journey, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Things don't stop for that. So yeah.
No.
Well, thank you, Pat. That was really interesting.
Pleasure.